off on a mission. You didn't know how that was going to end. You didn't know whether it was going to crash. I didn't want to get shot down. I was willing to. And I was willing to try and walk out. I didn't want to be blown to pieces. When you think of it, it's really unbelievable. World War II was something that unbelievable.
There she sat on Buttermilk Hill. Who could blame her, cry her fill? And every tear would turn a mill. Johnny has gone for a soldier.
The following memoir is a short story in the long life of a loving man, Tommy Thompson. Devoted husband, adoring father, proud grandfather, World War II hero. As this chapter in his biography begins, it's early 1942. The United States has plunged into war, and young men from every part of America are enlisting in the armed forces. Like thousands of others, Tommy, just 19 years old, joins up. He dreams of being a pilot.
Most of us young men in the age of 17 up were thinking about wondering what they're going to do. A very large number decided to volunteer. And I decided, well, I'll sign up. I decided I'd try to be a pilot. I knew I was going to be drafted anyway. Sometimes around September, I was told to report in.
Headquarters, 6th Service Command, Office of the Commanding General, Private Clarence Carl Thompson, 413 North Wyola, LaGrange, Illinois. By direction of the President, you are ordered to active duty effective October 25th, 1942, and on that date will proceed from your home to Chicago, Illinois, to the officer in charge.
To Sunday afternoon, reported into Stevens Hotel, the then biggest hotel in downtown Chicago, taking it over as a reception center. Called my name. They put us on a bus, took us over to the Illinois Central Railroad Station. We ended up in Nashville, Tennessee. It was an Army Air Force reception center, primarily for flight crew volunteers. I had never been in an area like it in my life. All brand new, one-story, cheaply built barracks. Some big buildings, those were mess halls and administrative buildings, and a hospital. First thing they did was ran us through for a physical. At the end of this, we were carrying our clothes and our suitcase with us. They got us in line and gave us shots. Took us over to another area, gave us uniforms, shoes. And they were the same uniforms I was to wear through the whole war. At the end of the line, it was a place, as I remember, they had a bunch of paper bags, very stiff, strong ones. On one side, there was put your home address on it. Put your suitcase and your clothes you got on in there. Put those military uniforms on, and we'll ship your stuff back to the address you write on there. Until October or November 1945. That's the last I saw of civilian clothes.
And civilian life. Born July 24th, 1922 in Akron, Ohio, Clarence Carl Thompson was the firstborn of Dorothy Lee Kimball, a belle from Mobile, and
Clarence Columbus Thompson. A hell of a bad name for a kid. My dad was the kind of person, he got along with everybody. He was extremely bright. He had a degree from Iowa State University. My mother was born in 1895. He was a very gentle, warm person.
when the war broke out, Tommy and his family lived in LaGrange, Illinois, just outside Chicago.
My dad was working for Chrysler Corporation in the marketing, merchandising portion of Chrysler. There were 5 of us kids. I was the oldest. My brother Gene, who was a year younger than me. Next down, about 3 years younger, was my sister Betty. About 2 years later, my brother Richard, and then my sister Dorothy. She was the youngest. My dad was a restless man. We lived in Pontiac, we lived in Detroit, we lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We bounced. My mother, moving from place to place was hard on her. It was, I think, on my brother Gene and I, it was the hard thing for us. Everybody in neighborhoods would know each other, but we wouldn't. So growing up in LaGrange, we met some people in high school, but not many. We didn't have much of a chance. And then the war came around and totally disrupted us more. My brother Gene and I were both attending junior college when the war erupted.
Tommy and Jean, close in age, were also especially close friends.
November 2nd, 1942. Dear Tommy, most of the boys were pretty surprised when they found out that you had gone. We just got your last letter a few minutes ago, and if I were you, I wouldn't worry about not passing the physical or mental examinations. Forget about them after you take them, for you will pass. We will send all the stuff you asked for as soon as we can get it. If you can get a picture taken of yourself in your present uniform, it would be a good idea. All your darkroom stuff has been packed and locked, as well as the stuff on the back porch. Your debts and responsibilities are rapidly being taken care of. You don't have to worry about a thing. I passed all mental tests in the Signal Corps, and they put me in as a junior radio repair electrician. If I pass the physical, I'll tell you everything about the Signal Corps. Gene.
In Nashville, Private First Class Thompson's evaluation and training continued. He went to classes, attended lectures, studied training films.
Mess management, supply, military law, and 27 more subjects.
Then it was masses of tests, psychological, eye exams, over and over they went after your eyes. But whether you're colorblind, depth perception, quick memory, if you give you numbers, letters, words, interviews, then back for more physical checks. They wanted to talk about your education, what classes you take, what kind of work you had done, what type of athletics you had been involved in. I was not an athletic type. They changed you. The push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. In the morning, they did it in the middle of the day, constantly. This period of checking kept checking eyes.
With mounting psychological and emotional pressure, the would-be pilot's battle armor is being forged inside and out.
I couldn't understand on me. I knew my eyes before I went in were just not quite 20/20, and I'd hoped. Well, it turned out I got a call one day and told report to a particular building.
I'm sorry, Tommy, but your eyes aren't 20/20. I don't think you'll be flying as a pilot.
It was an unbelievable shock.
After enduring the news about his flying status, Tommy was sent for basic training to Keesler Field, Biloxi, Mississippi.
So they kept us going 24 hours a day. You had to go on the runs and the constant physical training. Masses of guys, wherever you went, if you slacked, somebody was there pushing. They wanted you in good physical shape.
The Keesler base, deep in the heart of Dixie, was just a stone's throw from Mobile, his mother's birthplace.
My mother's side of the family, the Kimball side, everybody was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama. My grandmother, Kimball, her name was Mary Elizabeth. She was a strong-minded, in some ways opinionated, a dedicated Catholic,
and a dedicated fan of her warrior grandson.
Income tax day. Tommy dear, we are saying the rosary every day for you, that you will keep well and be successful. Pass the tests, for you certainly deserve it. Now, should it happen that you will again be disappointed, you will be a brave soldier. Keep a stiff upper lip, but remember that we love our boy and will continue to pray for our boy every day. Love, Grandmother.
Having endured the rigors of basic training and wanting to fly no matter what, Tommy volunteered for gunnery school and was sent to the Aircraft Armament Training Facility at Lowry Field, Denver.
I heard about gunnery and volunteered for it. Put us in altitude chambers, which was a large tank, possibly 15 feet long, 10 feet high on the inside, steel tank. Had windows in it at different points. People on the outside could see what was going on. Windows that people could look in at you, not that you look out. Really what it was a vacuum chamber that they hooked a big vacuum pump to it. They were checking you to see how you react with reduced oxygen, the rarefied air. If you could handle it, how it would affect you as a person and how you were affected psychologically. If you don't get enough oxygen, particularly they emphasize 10,000 feet. If you don't get the oxygen, you're gonna have an anoxia, and your brain is not going to be working. And I think that happened to me once or twice.
In an ever-widening arc on his trajectory with fate, Tommy's world spiraled out across the west. Next stop, Wendover Field, Utah. Here he was assigned to a replacement crew with the 448th Bombardment Group, 8th Air Force.
And trained in all kinds of stuff. The primary training was oriented towards how to handle 50 caliber machine gun. The B-24 had flexible 50s. It was a machine gun set, a bracket like oars on a rowboat, pivot point that you could turn it in any direction you want to go, lift it up and down. They were just poked through a hole in the nose of the airplane. There were three of them in the front, one firing forward, one firing on either side. Part of that training, escape and trap shooting, was a 12-gauge shotgun. That, in effect, would simulate like a plane coming directly at you. Now, would you shoot below it, or do you shoot high? The whole key was teaching what they call and do now, what they call is deflection shooting. Your idea was is to have your bullets arriving at the airplane at the target at the right time.
July 29th. Dear Tommy, the sweetest letter ever received today. I'll keep it and cherish it forever. We are so proud of our darling boy. War is war. We must all do our part, even to sacrificing our loved ones. Life would not be worth living under Hitler's heel, so fight we must. Little did we think that our baby boy would someday be one of the many to fight for freedom and peace. Someday, when this awful war is over, our boy will return, happy that he did not shirk his duty. We will say prayers each and every day for you, also for all our brave lads who will risk their lives for their country's cause. Happy birthday and lots of love, Grandmother.
It's the summer of '43. Under the stark Utah sky, the young gunner turns 21, gets his wings, and meets for the first time the airship that will carry him to safety and back through 30 combat missions, the B-24 bomber. First designed and flown in 1939, the Army Air Corps XB-24 was built to bomb. Powered by four 1,200 horsepower Pratt Whitney engines, the Liberator, fully loaded, carried 8,000 pounds of bombs, 10 50 caliber machine guns, and a crew of 10.
We were overloaded with fuel and ammunition, and you didn't know when it was going to crash. Because at the end of the runway, you didn't know whether you were going to complete the takeoff on the mission.
Named the Liberator by the English nanny who worked for one of the plane's designers, nearly 18,500 B-24s were built at 5 aircraft plants around the country. The B-24 flew more combat missions and dropped more bombs than any other aircraft in the war. Early versions of the plane did not include the nose turret. By mid-1943, however, they did.
I flew in the nose turret. I flew tail turret. I thought it was a little bit easier, safer than the ball turret. The ball turret was a trap. It was where I was in the nose. It was just as bad a trap, but I felt a little bit safer.
It was here in the nose, isolated from the rest of the crew, with just his .50 caliber machine guns for company, that Tommy would soon be flying.
That feeling of when we were flying combat all together, it came to every one of us. We were part of it.
Like a brooding moon casting an ominous shadow over an ever more desolate planet, the Nazi pall over Europe loomed large and dark as 1943 drew to a close. After 2 years of battling the Fuhrer, Allied commanders knew that to win the war, they must rule the air.
The United States philosophy was to use strategic, high-altitude heavy bombers to try to destroy an enemy nation's infrastructure, their capability to wage war, primarily factories, ships, economic areas.
And so, with the dawn of the new year, they began to implement their master plan. Pulled into the vortex of the worldwide war machine, Tommy and his comrades are ready, or not. After 14 months of testing, training, and toughening, they're catapulted from the heartland of America to the green of England's far shores, from peace and order at home to chaos and fear abroad.
The commander says, take that bomb and drop it. And so if the orders aren't to do that, you do it.
Seething Airfield was one of scores of bases clustered throughout East Anglia, a spit of England jutting out into the Channel in close proximity to France and the continent. This was to be home for Tommy and the 460 officers, 2,600 enlisted men, and 60 B-24s of the 448th Bomb Group.
We were located very close to the coast, but other airfields were within 10 miles of us. As close as they could put them, each one of those airfields had about 40 airplanes.
Target for the day is Anklam. Specifically, you are to destroy the Arado factory.
The Allied plan was for the U.S. 8th Air Force and elements of the 9th to augment RAF nighttime bombing missions with daring daylight thrusts into enemy territory, supported by increased numbers of fighter escorts, P-38s, and deadly Mustangs. The Allies would send swarms of B-24s and B-17 flying fortresses to pound strategic targets by day, railroad yards, refineries, factories, and aircraft plants. The RAF would repeat the punishing by night.
Now, gentlemen, this is the type of target you don't want to have to go back after the second time.
I just remember going to the first briefing, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, rushing to the briefing headquarters, and this map of the whole of Northern Europe, mostly the areas where the Germans were. And that was all covered by a cloth with a drawstring. The group commander would get up and brief us.
Remember that your biggest enemy is still the single-engine fighter plane.
They'd have it laid out on the map, starting where we are, and here's the target. On there, they'd show the route that they wanted us to go. Then they'd show they knew the location, all the anti-aircraft installations, the type of type of guns and weapons, and how accurate they were. They knew the location of the German fighter interceptors.
Defenses at the target. Major Frost, what about the flight defenses?
Go through briefing, get all of our flight gear, clothing, all that stuff on. Be hauled out to the airplane, climb into the airplane, check out your position, whatever things you were going to do, and take off. Taking off was very scary to me. The airplane was loaded with fuel, bombs, oxygen. Planes were loaded up to the maximum you could put on them. Every time you take off, it was a real stress, because you didn't know whether the damn plane was going to crash. As I remember, the first raid was someplace in Germany.
From the Gunner's Journal.
February 24th, 1944, Gotha, Germany. Target aircraft dispersal areas. Altitude 18,000 feet. Temperature 24 degrees centigrade. Takeoff 0900. Escorted by 18 groups of P-38, 47, 51s, and Spitz. Very good visibility. Medium flak for about 40 minutes before hitting the target, and heavy flak all the way across Belgium to the coast. The enemy knocked down one B-24, cockpit in flames. Exploded after several men bailed out. They knocked another one out of formation, engine out. Large number of enemy aircraft, many of which were knocked down by our escort. For a while, there was a trail of spinning and diving forts, libs, and enemy fighters behind us.
It was unbelievably deadly, serious. Everybody concentrated on their job. Nobody laughed. Everybody just kept their eyes open and kept their minds on what they were doing.
Used 36 fragmentation bombs, 6 20-pound frag bombs to a cluster. Both waist gunners and the tail gunner get shots at enemy aircraft. The ship was hard to fly, so pilot wouldn't let me drop the ball turret or would have got some beautiful shots off. There were 39 ships sent on this mission from the 448th, the largest number yet sent. 65 bombers were lost in the day's operations. It's the largest number of ships lost by the 8th Air Force to date. Ship name, BTO. 448th Group praised for this by General Doolittle.
Whenever we got back from a mission, every crew went through a debriefing.
What about enemy fighter opposition? Well, that's something we could not discuss. Really, right. Well, let's get some of the details. Where did it begin, Paul?
An intelligence officer went through a series of questions. The navigator, one of his functions was to keep a log, track where we were, and anything anybody saw, we'd call over the intercom and tell him. He would make notes on his log. If we saw a target, or lots of times we carried a K-20 aerial camera. The waist gunners took pictures off the windows. They would call in whenever they took pictures, anything on the ground. They would try to get pictures, and maybe they would have been usable.
Men, the going's going to be rough. You're going to have to throw your necks in there and stay in there and pitch every minute.
I remember one time, it looked like 100 German fighters. One bomb group after another, and they came right through it, trying to break up the formations. If a bomber pilot got nervous and scared, and his job was just to keep boring right on through. But if he got scared and broke formation, other planes would have to swing. Once the formation would be broken up, then the Germans can take on the planes as they spread out. It would never happen. The discipline was very, very good. We knew that the Germans were trying to break up the formation. But our best defense was the closer we were together in formation. That meant we could bring to bear all of the guns, more guns, and it was much more dangerous for the Germans to attack us. I thought those Germans had a hell of a lot of guts to come in and attack those formations, going one after another.
Don't think it'll be too bad. And whether it's easy or rough, I'll be sitting out in front, taking the whole works in.
Though bombing missions were launched constantly, and the pilots and gunners were preoccupied with combat, there were distractions.
I was in my picture in a frame. Just see what the boys in the back room for, and tell them I sigh, and tell them I cry.
I remember going to the British Women's Land Army. Girls from various places would come out and dances and get a chance to get to know them. Getting to know the British people, I got to like them very much.
So much so that on several occasions he traded in his high spot in the bomber to see the high spots of the capital. Westminster Abbey, Piccadilly Circus, the Strand, and cultivate some favorite watering holes.
So far as going to London, I think I got to know every bar in downtown London. Every place, everything, every place you could think of.
It's early 1944. The royal family is young, and so is Tommy. Young still, perhaps, but not so innocent. Britain had withstood bombing by the Luftwaffe in the Blitzkrieg for months on end. Many parts of London were in ruins.
I saw a lot of areas that had been damaged. Windows were all taped so that in case of an explosion, the glass shards would not fly around as much. In fact, I remember seeing people on the streets with horrible cuts.
When the Luftwaffe was on its way and the air raid sirens blew, Londoners fled to the subway.
They'd force you down into the lower platform, the air raid wardens. Everybody had to get down into the subways. And along the platforms, there would be beds. There would be people on. They had pads on. They looked like they'd been used a lot. I remember seeing British Royal Air Force pilots with horrible injuries and scars on their face. Obviously, guys had been shot down and had fire on the plane. Probably the Battle of Britain types. That was something that was unnerving.
Unnerving for the Nazis was the Allies' response to Hitler's incessant bombing of Britain. As March roared in like a lion, 8th Air Force bombers blasted out across the continent, deep into enemy territory, on the first of a series of raids on Berlin. Of all Tommy's 30 combat missions, the 4 that took place over Berlin during the month of March 1944 capture the essence of his experience.
The first U.S. daylight raid on Berlin. I could see the cluster of a couple other B-24 bomb groups as we were flying towards Berlin. B-17 bombers were coming back. They had gone into bombing Berlin first. I could see those planes smoking and lots of battle damage on. They were going reverse direction from us, and it was not comfortable seeing the damage that some of them had received. It was a sunlit day. There were no clouds. I could look forward, and I could see a dark cloud. It was smoke from the thousands of anti-aircraft shells that exploded. These shells really exploded around us.
From the Gunner's Journal.
March 6, 1944, Berlin, Germany. Altitude 21,700 feet. Temperature minus 29 degrees centigrade. Escorted by P-38s, 47s, 51s. Target, Daimler-Benz plant at Genfhagen, a suburb about 15 miles from the center of Berlin. Clouds all the way. We had medium flak sporadically most of the way until we hit Berlin, and then we really caught hell. It was the heaviest flak the group has run into yet. The flak punched holes under number 2 and 3 engines on the right side of the navigator compartment. The same good-sized hole on the left vertical and horizontal stabilizers.
From the London Daily Express, March 7, 1944. Hundreds of flying fortresses and liberators cracked the dying city of Berlin yesterday and left it blazing in the first day offensive carried out by American bombers in the air invasion of Germany. They fought their way through to the heart of the city. They fought battles over it and in and out of the clouds all around it. From Stars and Stripes, American heavy bombers attacked Berlin in force yesterday, with Saturday's attack by a single formation. It was the second U.S. blow in 3 days on the German capital, and the city's first major daylight assault. Liberators and fortresses heaped high explosives and incendiaries on their Berlin targets, with both visual and cloud technique bombing to smash the Nazis' last lingering hopes. Virtually every bomber crew told of intense walls of flak ringing the capital. It was expected that the number of bombers reported missing from the day's operations might be among the highest in 8th Air Force history. From the Gunner's Journal.
March 9, 1944, Berlin, Germany. 8-hour and 5-minute flight time. The target was the aircraft factory at Brandenburg, a suburb of Berlin, producing 40% of the parts for Junker 88s and Heinkel 177s. Altitude 21,000 feet, temperature minus 20 degrees centigrade. Escorted by P-38s, 47s, and 51s. We didn't have much flak until we passed over Hanover, Germany. There we were met by an intense and very accurate, but not too large barrage for about 15 minutes. Received hits on the right vertical stabilizer. Just missed the right Tokyo tank. Another struck the plexiglass of the nose turret where I was riding, right in front of my face. The only thing that saved my neck was the thick bullet-resistant glass mounted just behind the plexiglass. No enemy fighters. Carried 50 100-pound incendiaries. Right nose gun out because of a burnt-out booster motor. Carried chaff on this raid. The other crew in my barracks was lost in this raid, crew number 18. They were last sighted over the Zuider Zee. This is 22:30 on the 9th and no word yet, so I guess they'll be listed as missing in action. Ship number 232, named the Menace. Crew 18 officially listed as missing in action, all except the pilot, who was found washed ashore dead.
Well, if you say, there's 6 guys and you go out on a mission and come back, and here's all these bunks with all their stuff sitting there, and nobody comes back.
From the Gunner's Journal.
March 16, 1944, Friedrichshafen, Germany. Target, the glider bomb factory. Ship named Sleepless Nights. Rode about halfway in the nose turret and then took over left waist because the left waist gunner's feet started to freeze. We were on oxygen 6 hours, which is the longest I've been on oxygen at one time.
When those guns would start bracketing us, we'd be moving along, and the shells would come up, and I could see from where I was. I could look around the part. I couldn't see behind us, but I could see shells coming up, and just as we'd move along, the shells would just be right in there for bursting. Sometimes below us, sometimes beside us, sometimes above, and the airplane. Sometimes you could. If they get close, you could feel it lift up. One of the raids, we had used all of the fuel in those main tanks. One of those tanks, 20mm shells exploded. Gasoline started sloshing out. The smell of gasoline was really all the way to the nose turn. It was like you could pick it up. The only reason I'm here is if the fuel tank had been empty, it would have been fuel vapor and it would have been an explosion and blown out. I wouldn't be here. But the tank was full and it just blew a hole.
From the Gunner's Journal.
March 22nd, 1944, Berlin. Target was the station and the rail yards and subway station. Altitude 19,500 feet. Temperature minus 45 degrees centigrade. Escorted by P-51s, 38s, and 47s. Could see the North Sea most of the time until we got near Denmark. Flak was extremely heavy over Berlin, but not too accurate. The inaccuracy was probably due to the large number of planes coming in from all directions and the large amount of chaff we dropped. Tail gunners saw one B-24 go down with the tail completely gone. We were hit by flak ships in the English Channel on our way back.
Didn't make it. Whether they were dead or what have you. And that really began eating at me. It wasn't, I got scared. Damn scared at times.
From the Daily Sketch, March 23, 1944. Berlin's industrial and military targets were bombed yesterday, while for 5 hours, millions of Germans listened as their radio gave a running commentary. The great force of American fortresses and liberators was probably more than 600 strong, with a fighter escort of Thunderbolts, Lightnings, and Mustangs, numbering something like 1,000. Berlin had a taste of the 500-pound M76 bomb. Once this huge incendiary bomb starts to burn, it cannot be put out. Crews reported seeing fires through the clouds.
Can you imagine coming home from a deal like that, and you come home and get off the airplane and see all the holes in it, and I was dumbfounded sometimes how we made it back.
But make it back he did, again and again, throughout April into May, on missions over Germany and France, until finally.
The last mission I was on, it was the day before D-Day. On the way back, you could see the ships off the coast, in the river. We didn't know it was the next day. Next morning, we're told that the landings were on.
Tommy's last combat mission was a raid over Sangatte, France, on June 5, 1944. With the dawn of June 6th came the Allied forces' massive invasion against the Third Reich. For Hitler, D-Day was the beginning of the end. For Tommy, it was the end of his World War II flying career.
I did my job. I was a soldier. That's what each one of us did. We did our job. Is that a good way of putting it?
Sergeant Clarence Carl Thompson, serial number 1607928, was honorably discharged October 22, 1944. He served 2 years, 11 months, and 28 days in World War II. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal, the Good Conduct Medal, and other commendations and decorations. He served 21 months in the Korean War. In 1958, he married Elizabeth Garnier. Together, they had Mary, David, Richard, and Beth. They and their families celebrate his heroic memory and acknowledge with gratitude and love an extraordinary chapter in a life well lived.